Hi, everyone. Welcome to another NAMI Lunch and Learn. I'm excited about today's presentation, and I hope we get some more folks joining us. It looks like we are. Please mute yourself, just in case. I think this is, we'll be giving you a time to ask Shawn questions later on. I'm Joanna, by the way. I am the Vice President of our NAMI affiliate here in Johnson County. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about Shawn before he gets started. His journey is a testament to resilience and transformation. From a challenging childhood marked by instability and adversity, he found his footing through perseverance and determination. His time in the military not only shaped his skills, but instilled in him a sense of duty and purpose. Despite facing the demons of PTSD and addiction, Shawn's story takes a turn towards redemption as he reclaims his life through education and entrepreneurship. His experiences both in the battlefield and the business world have equipped him with invaluable insights and expertise. He's going to share some of those today, and I think it'll be an interactive, really exciting time. Thank you, Shawn, for joining us.
Thank you so much, Joanna. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen if that's okay.
Yes.
First off, I do want to start by saying thank you to you specifically, Joanna and Ellie Joe, for reaching out to somebody you probably wouldn't normally reach out to. It shows to me your guys' level of intention when it goes to helping out with mental illness is just unparalleled, and that you guys are going above and beyond to seek a different perspective, to find new ways or different ways from people that potentially have lived experience to help us all see things from a different lens and ultimately help each other make a bigger impact. So thank you from the bottom of my heart to both of you guys. So also a big shout out to NAMI. Thank you so much for what you're doing. I'm super excited to be here today and to be a part of your guys' mission to help everybody else just transform their life and to find new tools to find more love and find more peace and to find ultimately some happiness. So today I'm going to talk about breaking the cycle and how by changing your story can change your life. And now you heard a little bit about my background. My story is not one that's similar to most, and that's okay. But first, I'm not going to get into that just yet. So let's go ahead and talk about what I am going to talk about. The first thing I want to talk about is how the impact of our own personal stories has on other people, and it has on ourselves. After that, I want to teach you about this VIP framework that I've created. It might be a little bit differently than what you're expecting, so be ready for that. And then I'm going to leave you with some empowering strategies that's going to give you some tools and some actionable steps that you can take with you and apply to your own life. And then I'm going to go into a question and answers. And then from there, I'm going to share some final thoughts. So a few things that I ask of you today. One, show up with a positive attitude. Show up with an open mind. And hopefully show up with a journal or something to write with, because I'm going to share some tools that I think can really help you, not only for yourself, but for the other people that are in your lives as well. How do we tell our stories in a way that matters? Our stories have so much power. And if we are able to shape our stories into a way that we want, it's going to have a positive impact on our reality. Now, if our stories are not shaped by the things that we want and they're stuck in the past, that's going to have a negative impact on our reality. So I'm going to share with you a couple tools on how we could reframe that lens to create new tools, so that way we could use those for empowering steps moving forward. The first step to this change is vulnerability. Now, by being vulnerable, we are able to actually be honest with ourselves. We're able to maybe ask for help. We're able to find ways that we could see things in a way that says, hey, you know what? this could be a little bit better, and I'm willing to do what it takes to figure that out, whether that means asking for help or it means just doing something for ourselves that maybe we wouldn't normally do. Now, the best part about this is that it promotes self-advocacy. So if we're able to teach people how to identify their own needs, then they'll be able to learn how to communicate those needs clearly, which is only going to help everyone work together when moving the needle in the direction that we want it to. Changing your story can have a significant impact on changing your life. So if I reflect on my story and look at the times where when I was a young kid and I didn't have a father, and my mom emphasized that asking for help was a sign of weakness, if I were to maintain that stigma, I would be stuck in a very predictable future. But I'm able to reframe that and switch the lens in which I look at that so that I could lead a life of empowerment and create a life by design. So let me ask you this. How do you tell your story? Now, I'm not asking how you tell your story to just other people, but how do you tell your story in your head? Is it the life of, hey, I was physically and sexually abused as a kid? Because I choose not to tell that story, not for any other reason than I've learned the lessons that I need to. I've come to terms and I've come to peace with those situations, and I've been able to leverage those into things that are tools versus things that are disempowering that keep me stuck. Do you tell your story from the past tense of, man, I wish I could go back and have a conversation with this person one more time? Do I go back to a situation where I wish I would have made a better decision or a different decision? Or do I tell it from a perspective of, this is what I'm excited about. This is what I'm working towards. This is what I'm looking forward to in my life. When we're surrounded by a community of people that have been doing the same thing forever, or it's so ingrained with a friend group that we've known for decades, it gets really challenging to see things from a different perspective. It gets really difficult to look at it from a different lens, to see areas in which you can improve, and to see things that maybe could be a little bit different and better. But if we don't know how to be vulnerable with those things and take a look at those things from a different lens, then it gets really hard for us to make any type of change. So how many people know what a VIP is? In the chat box, go ahead and write who the VIP is in your life, because I'm interested. Who's the VIP? There we go. Yeah. Who's some other VIPs you got in your life? Awesome. Amazing. So perfect. I love this. Excellent. Now, I love the fact that, Shauna, you started out with saying the VIP in my life is me. Now, Matt, you're not wrong by saying that a lot of people are going to be in trouble if they don't say their spouse. Trust me, my wife would agree with you. However, understanding that there's a couple more that actually put myself as the VIP. And that's what I'm trying to get to here, is that, yes, we have amazing people in our lives. Our family members are very important people, our spouses especially. But how often is it stigmatized to say that I'm the most important person in my life? Can anybody relate to that? Oftentimes, our cultural norms will say that by putting others first, it makes us seem like our prioritization is wrong. We feel guilty. We feel ashamed. But let me ask you this, if you're putting yourself on the back burner and you're not doing things that fill your cup first, you're constantly pouring out of your own cup to show up for other people. How do you end up showing up for yourself? How do you end up really showing up for those people? If your cup's not full and it's almost empty, you can't pour very much out of that cup before you're completely depleted, which ultimately ends up not being able to show up at all, which will lead us to depression, which will lead us to anxiety, which leads us to stress. I can tell you that I grew up for the longest time being externally defined, wanting to constantly make everyone else around me happy. But it wasn't until I actually got real vulnerable with myself to ask for help from other people, to see that I was constantly pouring out of my own cup into everybody else's, that I didn't have anything else left for me at the end of the day. So what I was able to learn is that by being vulnerable, this is the first step in changing your story. The vulnerability through self-reflection is key, because if we're able to be self-reflective in a way that we could see our own vulnerabilities, it's going to collapse time frames in which it's going to take us to move past those and to learn the lessons that we need to create new tools and new strategies to continue to move forward. It allows us to acknowledge our struggles and to begin the actual healing process. Because what's in your awareness is in your control. But if it's not in my awareness, because I've been doing the same thing my whole life, I've been doing the same thing every day. And if anybody knows Dr. Joe Dispenza, he's been doing clinical research for decades at this point. And he talks about 90% of our thoughts, or over 90% of our thoughts, are the exact same thoughts that we had yesterday. And so if our thoughts are the same, and I wake up and I hit this alarm on my phone with the same hand, and it's in the same position next to my bed, and I get up and I brush my teeth and I go through the same motions and I drive the same way to work and I go do the same job and I have the same conversations with the same people, how do I ever expect anything to change? And so vulnerability is how we're able to look at that and go, you know what? Maybe there is something that I'm willing to change. Maybe there is something that could be better. Maybe I can be open-minded enough to look at this and hear a different lens. So once we become aware, we're able to observe these things that are potentially in our shadows. Now, when I first started doing this through meditation, through breath work, through hypnosis, through working with other professionals, it became a challenge for me to observe these things without absorbing them. Now, what I mean by that is going back into, say, my childhood or going into my military experiences and recanting specific events and being able to look at that event and to feel that emotional charge and then to observe it and allow it to pass versus allow that feeling to take over me. Allow that feeling to absorb into my body and drive me throughout the rest of the day, throughout the rest of the week, and sometimes even longer. And by doing so, I could look at that, allow it to pass, and then take away a valuable lesson. The valuable lesson is often found for me by trying to see it from a different lens. So how can I look at me being taken away from my mom on Thanksgiving Day as something that's of service or of benefit to me? Because being a 7-year-old kid and being taken away from your mom isn't exactly fun, I'll tell you that. And it can often be something that sticks with people, and myself, has stuck with me for a really long time. And so by being able to look at that, look at that situation and try to find a positive lens on it. First, I had to honor the feeling that I was hurt. I had to honor the feeling that I felt abandoned. I had to honor the feeling that I didn't feel enough, because I have every right to feel that way. I'm not saying the shift of the lens has to take away from how I feel. I'm not saying I have to deny how I feel. I'm saying that I don't have to sit in that feeling. I could take that, honor it, feel that, find a way to connect with my 7-year-old self, give him a big old hug, find out what he needs, and to be able to step into that moving forward, so I could look at that and say, hey, you know what? That situation gave me a tremendous amount of strength. It showed me a tremendous amount of resilience. It helped me to learn a tremendous amount of courage. All of these things are great things that I get to take with me today. I took with me into the Army, and I get to take with me when I get to share these messages with other people. Because if I choose to sit in that emotional state, feel that pain, feel that sorrow, feel that sadness on a day-to-day basis, I know that I have a very predictable outcome on where that path goes. And statistically, it's not good. It's not good. If we look at statistics for kids that are put into foster care, the numbers are not good. The numbers are not good. And as sad as it is, I lived up to some of those statistics. But I've also lived outside of those statistics and been able to become an outlier to all of those statistics. And part of that started with being vulnerable. The next part of this is intention. This is the I in VIP. So it took me 32 years to learn intentionality. The first 32 years of my life, I kind of just went by the seat of my pants. I did what society told me to do to a certain degree. Don't get me wrong. I was devious in my own ways, and I don't need to get into that at this time. But living life with an intention and living life with a specific modality wasn't something I learned, and it wasn't something I was taught in my public school that I went to, that's for sure. What I mean by this is that when I wake up on a day-to-day basis, I have things that are already set out for me that I know that I'm going to do. And I know that if I'm doing these on a day-to-day basis, I'm living with a certain degree of intentionality, that 1% shift has a massive effect over time. Now, these things go back into what I just talked about of making sure I'm the VIP of my life and doing things that fill my cup. They don't have to be anything crazy. I don't have to go and run 10 miles, but I do want to do some sort of workout because my physical health is key for me to being able to show up for other people and to be able to show up for myself. I do want to read every single day because those are the kinds of things that help me grow and help me learn. And again, help me show up better for those around me. I do want to meditate because having a clear mind is key for me to be able to shut off the noise that's constantly going in my head so I could stay focused and on the path that I'm trying to go. What I've found is that if I stop doing these things, I just become a product of my external environment. If I'm not in the driver's seat, driving in a specific direction that I want to go, I get taken by the outside factors and they start to dictate my life. And if the outside factors are a part of the conditioning that I grew up with, or part of the conditioning with certain social circles that I kept for a long time, or part of the conditioning of the limited mindsets that I maintained for so long because I didn't know how to get out of it, then again, I just become another statistic. I become a person that is being floated, drifting throughout life. And it's hard for me to feel any level of excitement when I'm drifting versus doing a couple small things that lead me in the direction that I want to go. Being intentional is like driving a car with a map. Lacking intentionality is driving a car without a map. Now, granted, we're not using MapQuest anymore. We all have GPS on our phone. But what do you do if your phone's dead and you're traveling across the United States? I promise, in order for you to get to where you want to go, you're probably going to have to ask somebody for some directions. You're probably going to have to find a way to find the roadmap. Now, can you figure it out on your own? Absolutely. I'm a testament to being able to figure out life on your own. But I promise you, it's going to take you a lot longer to do so. When we're able to come up with a clear roadmap, we're able to come up with a plan, we're able to find other people to help us, and we live that life with intention, again, we're able to collapse timeframes and get to where we want to go so much faster with so much less stress. And the last part of this VIP framework is purpose. So purpose is the power of meaning. Now, how do we transform our pain into power? How do we transform our struggle into strength? So we're able to use this pain as a motivator, and we're able to continuously find value, find meaning, find strength once we've defined that purpose. Now, Viktor Frankl wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. It's one of my favorite books. It's a sad book in the sense that Viktor Frankl was a part of Nazi Germany and he was in a concentration camp. He was able to identify the people that were going to pass on by just looking at them. And the reason why he was able to identify these people is because they lost a sense of purpose. Oftentimes, we struggle to define a sense of purpose, and we just live by external factors, and society tends to dictate. For me, when I was able to find purpose and find a way to utilize my strength as a motivator, or my struggles as a motivator, it gives me a reason to get up and do the things that are hard. It gives me strength in the times where I'm struggling. It gives me a sense of drive because I know why I'm doing what I'm doing. And when the things get hard, when the days get hard, when the challenges stack up, I'm reminded of that purpose that allows me to get back to center so that I can continue forward with that 1% movement. So when I first learned about being vulnerable, being intentional, living life with purpose, again, was when I was 32. Now, by this time, I had already served in the military. I spent a year in Iraq. I spent almost a year in Africa training Congolese soldiers. And when I came back, I really struggled. I struggled with PTSD, not only from my military service, but all those things as a child, they started to resurface. That led me down a downward spiral of drugs and alcohol. And quite frankly, I lost all respect for human life. I saw how fragile life was. I saw how easily it was taken. And I just lost hope. It took me almost 10 years of living in that negativity, living in that turmoil, stuffing it into my shadow, avoiding it at all cost, before I realized that I was creating so much turmoil in my external reality. I was creating so much chaos. Chaos was the norm for me. Chaos was what I knew. Ever since I was a little kid, I had a high baseline of chaos. And so I had to learn that, you know what? You don't have to live in chaos. And it took somebody when I was 32 to show me a different lens. And that person introduced me to meditation and breath work and living life intentionally. And by stepping into being able to stop the chatter through meditation, I was able to realize that that's not how I wanted to continue to live. And there are other possible ways of living. And sometimes when I wanted to get help, I didn't know how to ask. Being in the military definitely doesn't help the fact that when you want to have help or want to get help, that it's often shunned. It's often stigmatized. It's often looked down upon as a sign of weakness. And so I had to be able to shift my lens on that and rewrite the stigma, to remove it from my life, to realize that that limiting belief didn't serve me. As a matter of fact, it kept me stuck. It kept me right where I was, even though the pain of that is something I didn't want. It was a familiar pain. It was a pain that I knew I could tolerate because I've been doing it for decades at this point. And so seeking help through therapists, seeking help through different types of plant medicine, seeking help through meditation retreats, seeking help through hypnosis, seeking help anywhere I could. I dove into learning as much about psychology as I could. I dove into learning about PTSD and addiction in any way that I could, taking different courses. And what I found is that there's a tremendous amount of resources at our fingertips if we're willing to ask. And so I'm excited that now I get to share these stories of my struggle as a first step to helping others want to share their stories too, so that we can all rewrite this, the way we tell our story, to live a life of joy, to live a life of happiness, and ultimately learn how to love ourselves. So a couple key takeaways from being vulnerable is that being vulnerable is so essential to creating meaningful and authentic connections. For a long time, I would put on a facade of neatness. I would put on a facade that everything was great, despite an insane amount of turmoil and pain and sadness in my heart. And once I became vulnerable, it was like there was a burden lifted off my shoulders. It was like I could finally breathe again. Now, creating these meaningful connections also helps us to cultivate safe containers in which other people feel like they can share too. And by creating those meaningful connections, I was able to create a community. And through this community, they have taught me a tremendous amount of additional tools. They've shown me the different support. Growing up in foster care, a lot of kids don't have family. Now I'm fortunate that I do have family. My family is across the country, but they're still there if I pick up the phone, and I'm blessed. We don't all have that. However, what we do have is the ability to continue to share our stories with the people around us, knowing that through time, that those stories will continue to expand, those concepts will continue to grow, and they'll become more easily accessible for those that are still learning how to reach out and ask for help. Brene Brown wrote a book called The Power of Vulnerability. And she wrote a quote that says, vulnerability is not winning or losing. It's having the courage to show up and be seen when we have no control over the outcome. So one of my favorite principles is the 3-foot rule. Now, if any of you follow me on social media, you've heard me talk about this before, but stick your arms out just like this. That's your 3-foot world. And that 3-foot world is the only thing that you have control of. That 3-foot world is everything that you have control of. Anything outside of that, you have zero control of it. You cannot control what that person does across the street. You cannot control what the person does on the other side of this call. all you can control is you. And inside this 3-foot world, how you show up, how you act, how you think. And by taking control of our 3-foot world, we release the expectations and the attachment to whatever outcome is that you may have towards that other person or the other group or whatever the case is. And so if we focus on our 3-foot world and you focus on doing things that fill your cup, you focus on doing things that are in alignment with what you want to do, and you focus on making yourself the best version of yourself, through osmosis, your 3-foot world now begins to grow because other people are going to be interacted once they encounter the engagements with you as well. And this leads to a deep level of authenticity. It leads to so much deeper level of fulfillment. And ultimately, it leads to realizing that we are everything that we all need, and everything we all need is right here inside of us. So intention. Intention is the next part of this. Now, living intentionally, again, I didn't learn this concept until much later in life. And what I've realized is that being intentional is a day-to-day practice that takes consistent effort and intention. It takes consistency in knowing what it is that you're trying to accomplish. It takes clarity. Now, what I've found is that you can learn these things on your own, but if you're able to work with some type of mentor, or if you're able to work with some type of coach, you're able to work with somebody else that's maybe doing the things that you want to do, they're going to help you shorten those time frames and get to where you go at a much faster rate. Now, let me ask, by a show of hands, has anybody ever worked with a mentor or a coach before? You can raise your hand, put it in the chat box. Nice. Love that. I love that you guys have these types of mentors in your life. Growing up in foster care and growing up in a trailer park, I promise you, mentorship was not the first and foremost thing. It was actually, again, it's kind of a criminalistic mindset, very, very primal mindset of having to do things on your own and figure it out on your own. And helping other people was more about, hey, if I help that person, they're going to take something from me. Versus if I help other people, high tides rise all ships kind of concept. We can all lift each other up. So being able to make the shift from changing the mindset of self-reliance to seeking help, to create deliberate choices, and making a purposeful impact is all things that we want, but it's through living an intentional life is how we actually achieve. So I talked to you a little bit about doing things that fill my cup and living intentionally. And every day I start my momentum cycle. And the first thing I do is create a success, right? This can be as simple as making your bed. It could be as simple as not hitting the snooze button. It could be as simple as getting out of bed and going for a walk. Whatever it is, find a way to create a win. Find a way to create some sort of success. Find a way to create some sort of excitement. And if making your bed isn't exciting, change the lens in which you say it, because it's a win. You did something that you set out to do. You completed that task. That's a success. And once we create that success, we build confidence. We got that win. We did what we said we're going to do. And once we're confident, we got a little bit of confidence, that makes us want to do more. And we're more active. And once we're active for a long enough period of time, we build healthy habits. And guess what? Through healthy habits and consistency and through confidence, we perpetuate that cycle and it leads right back to success. Now, this momentum cycle is something that I live by. If I find myself in a negative momentum cycle, if I find myself in a destructive path, if I find myself feeling sad or depressed, I have to look, I have to take a step back and I have to look at what am I doing to feel differently? Am I even stacking any wins here? Am I having any level of success? Or am I just sitting stagnant and wanting to curl up in a ball because that's what depression does to me? If I'm able to shift the lens away and find those successes, we could then start to build a little bit of momentum and get ourselves out of that. And again, everything starts with us. And so if we're taking on the weight of the world and the people that we work with or the people that we encounter in our lives, and we're absorbing all those negative emotions, how can we get ourselves out of that? It's through this momentum cycle, finding small little micro wins and doing them on a consistent basis to make sure that you're continuously moving that momentum cycle in the direction that you want. And so a couple key things I want you to take away here is that intentional actions create real change. If you don't want to live a life that's completely reactive to the external world, you want to live a life that is by your own design. You want to help other people do the same. It starts by creating intentional actions. And it starts by actually observing what those actions are, right? And so if we're able to keep our commitments, monitor our progress, measure our efforts and our inputs, then we're actually able to see and measure the tangible results. And so in sales, we call this lead measures versus lag measures. Oftentimes people are outcome-driven people. I set a goal, and once I achieve this goal, then I'll allow myself to feel happy. Then I'll allow myself to do X, Y, or Z. However, if the goal is, I want to lose 30 pounds, and you lose 29, I think I'd be pretty stoked with that. But a lot of people won't allow themselves to feel that level of progress until they've accomplished the end goal. So being intentional is looking at the lead measures. Am I going to the gym every day? Am I monitoring my nutrition? Am I doing the things consistently that I know I need to do to get towards that end goal? Because once I shift the focus on the lead measures and the process that I'm making, I promise you're going to be a lot happier and you're going to get to that outcome a lot faster. Part of this process is creating that clear path, right? So if I'm purposeful with my why and I know what my why is, I have a sense of direction. I have a sense of meaning. I have a feeling of alignment. Now, when we're in our teenage years and we're early 20s, we may not have that purpose in mind. And maybe we don't even have that purpose in mind much later in life. That's okay. And I'll tell you what, my purpose has changed throughout my life. And that's okay too. But the point that I'm trying to make is that if we don't have a distance and we don't have a direction, we end up wandering. We end up going back and forth. We end up drifting. And by the time we wake up, we realize that we haven't gone anywhere. We've kind of just stayed stagnant. But if I have some sort of distance and direction in mind, I can move towards that. I have something to work for. I have something that gets me out of bed every day. And if it shifts direction later, that's fine. Be gentle on yourself. Just know that you're moving towards something that's worthwhile, that means something to you, and it's in alignment with what you want to be, how you want to show up. When we're clear on our purpose, we're able to reduce that noise. We're able to reduce that chatter in our head. We're able to create a level of focus and drive that's going to give us that mental and emotional relief that we want and to help us feel the way we want to feel. And this is one of the quotes I really enjoyed. It says, the more intentional you are about your choices, the more you expand your capacity to create the life that you want. All right, so with finding purpose, my purpose is what I found is to be of service to others, to take the lessons from my struggles and to share that with other people. And so by being able to give back, by being able to help other people beat depression, beat anxiety, beat the suicidal thoughts, to live a life of empowerment, to create successes that they might not have normally had, those are the things that light my fire. Now, my challenge for you is to figure out what lights your fire, what excites you. Can you create 5 minutes out of your day for something that's working towards that? Maybe you already are. I hope you already are. But what I'll tell you is that once I gained clarity on what my purpose was or my why, all the things that I struggled with started to fall by the wayside. The suicidal thoughts that I had, the depression that I was in, the anxiety that I struggled with, they all started to dissipate. They all started to disappear because I now had something that I was looking forward to, and I wasn't perpetuating the stories behind me no longer. So by gaining purpose, the things I want you to take away from this is that once you have purpose, it gives your life some sort of meaning. It helps you understand why you do the things that are hard. It gives you a sense of fulfillment, joy, happiness. I love the drive that I have when I wake up and I get that burning desire to be able to come on a call and to talk to people and to help people learn these different tools. I love the motivation that it gives me when I see my book being released and I get people that send me messages, emails, and phone calls saying how much it helped them. That is just such a gift that I want everybody else to experience. And I hope if you haven't experienced that in your life, that at some point you will. But if you take a little bit of time to gain clarity, that feeling will come a lot sooner than if you just spend the rest of the days, the rest of your time doing the same things that maybe you've been doing. And this last quote is, the two most important days in your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why. That one hits home. That one hits home because when I look back at my life and I was just drifting, I feel empty. I feel that despite a high degree of accomplishment, that I didn't feel what I wanted to feel. It didn't feel good. It didn't give me that sense of impact. It didn't give me that sense of meaning, and it certainly didn't give me a sense of drive. So for me, making that positive impact is what makes my life better, not just for me, but for other people around me too. All right, so to recap, VIP framework, vulnerability. Being vulnerable is the first step in changing your story. What's in our awareness is in our control. So if we're not aware of the things that are in our shadow, or we're not willing to be vulnerable to take a look at those things, to seek help, to ask others for some impact or some insight, then how are we ever going to make change? Second is the intention. Acting with intention is what turns choices into real change. If I make a decision that I'm going to use the fitness one, I want to get in shape, I have to be intentional with how I live my day. I have to be intentional with my diet, and I have to be intentional with my exercise. If I want to make X number of dollars, I have to be intentional with my inputs, right? I can't just be focused on the lag measures. I have to be focused on the lead measures and figuring out what I can do on a day-to-day basis, those micro steps, those 1% changes to move the needle in the direction I want to go. And the last one is purpose. Finding your purpose brings meaning to your experience and fuels your growth. Once you find that meaning to your life, you gain a sense of excitement. You gain a sense of purpose. You gain a sense of clarity. And when you have that level of clarity and excitement and you know what your purpose is, there's only one direction that you can go, and that's only to get better. So that's all I got for you today. Going into some Q&A, what types of questions do you have for me? What types of thoughts or maybe some input do you have on the framework that I set up? What are some things that you'd like to share? Renee Brown, Joanna shared a quote with a soft heart, strong back is something that I've always taken to heart. Renee Brown's amazing. I love that you brought that up because learning how to be gentle was something that it took me a really long time to learn. Now, talking about stigmas, being gentle in the military is almost an oxymoron. And so learning how to learn that level of discipline, learn that level of strength, but yet still learning how to be gentle isn't something that I didn't learn until much later in life. But being gentle with myself, being gentle with promotes more vulnerability, and it creates that safe container that creates the impact that I want to have. And so it's one of the most important things that I've learned. So thank you, Joanna, for bringing that up. Because being gentle is such an attribute, it's such a skill, but sometimes it takes consistent practice, especially if I'm with a loved one and maybe I feel disappointed because of an expectation that I have that they didn't live up to, or they didn't keep their commitment, or maybe they made a mistake. And being that I have a high expectation, or that I want something really more for that person, it used to be really hard for me to be gentle on that person and lead with compassion versus wanting to scrutinize, criticize, and show them why what they did was wrong. So thank you for that, Joanna. How do you handle people who zap your energy and bring you down? Great question, Mary. So that goes back into the observe versus absorb, right? So we call these energy vampires. I'm sure everybody's seen an energy vampire in their day. I know I've seen a lot. And so for me, this is having the tools to be able to shake that off and not allow it to suck the life out of me, not allow it to dictate the way I am. And one of those tools is surrounded by a concept of the deer in the headlights. Being in Iowa, we've all seen a deer on the roads. Hopefully you guys avoided hitting them, knock on wood. But does anybody know what happens to a deer after you drive by and you don't hit it? First it freezes, but what happens after you drive away? Does anybody know? No? Going once, going twice. So what happens after you drive past the deer and you don't hit it? It literally shakes it off and it prances about its day, not putting a second thought back into the experience that almost happened but didn't, right? How often have we got caught up in an experience where, oh my gosh, it was almost really bad, or almost didn't go well, or I almost failed. Or we get caught up in somebody else's drama, somebody else's life-sucking story that we can't shake it off. And so literally the term shake it off means just that. And what we've discovered through different research studies is that energy comes into our body. And if we don't have a way to express it, it gets stored there. There's a book called The Body Keeps a Score. Great book. If you haven't read it, I recommend it, where it talks about this concept. And so if we're not able to shake that off, we don't have a way to expel that energy, guess what? It's going to bring you down. It's going to suck the life out of you. And so sometimes I'll be driving in my car and I'll be frustrated because maybe somebody cut me off, or maybe I had a bad phone call, or whatever it is. And I'll just go, ah, ah. Now the people driving by me probably think I'm crazy, but I keep the windows up. It's up to you if you want to keep the windows up or not. Feel free to stir the pot. But I do this as a form of expressing myself, as a way to expel that energy, as a way to shake it off. So that way I don't have to carry it throughout my day. Another good way to do this is with a pillow. Screaming into a pillow, a super beneficial tool that I've used in the past, and a lot of other people have used too, to help shake it off. Breath work. is another one of my favorite tools. Breath work is literally something that you need absolutely nothing else other than yourself. And you just take a few minutes, take a few seconds even, just to take some long, extended breaths. Now, there's several different types of breath work, and I'm a breath work facilitator. This is how much I love breath work. And doing just three long breaths. So maybe it's 6 seconds in through your nose, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Exhale through your mouth for 8 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So actually, now that you brought this up, let's go ahead and everybody do this, because I got you for a couple more minutes. So let's go ahead and do 2 breaths. We're going to do a 6-second inhale and 8-second exhale, and we're going to do it together. So when I say go, we're going to breathe 6 seconds in through our nose. And then when I say release, you're going to do 8 seconds through your mouth. And we're just going to do it twice. So we're going to begin in 3, 2, 1. In through your nose for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. One more in through the nose. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, good. Go ahead and just return back to normal breathing. So this is just one type of breath work, right? There's tons. There's holotropic breathing, there's alkaline breath, there's breath of fire, and they all have their own specific purposes. I like this slow rhythmic breath because it's going to help us regulate our nervous system. It's going to help calm us down. It's going to help bring us back to a state of peace. And so oftentimes if somebody's taking the energy out of you, we need to kind of get back to center. This is a good way to do that. So Mary, I hope that helps.
I have really enjoyed this, Shawn. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Joanna and Ellie Joe. Thank you so much. Chris, amazing to see you too, by the way. But thank you so much for having me today. I hope that you guys learned some good tools. I hope that this was helpful and informative, but I really appreciate you taking the time to reach out, Ellie Joe and Joanne, for taking the time to get to know me a little bit more so I can share some of my story and journey as well.
Thank you so much, Shawn, for doing this for us.
Yes, we really appreciate it. You've given me a good start on my day. Well, thank you, everyone.